Welcome, everybody, to the VALR Podcast. It's a really great pleasure to have a special guest on today. Anthony and I met in the Singapore airport after Token 2049. I was taking the same flight from Singapore, got to chatting, met the people he was traveling with, and we decided to do this podcast. Anthony, thank you very much for making the time to be with us today.
No, I appreciate it. It was fun. It was fun to run into you. Of course, that is the most of all the jet lag trips. That is my most jet laggy of trips, man. I was really dragging.
Maybe as just a quick introduction, excuse me, I'm also recovering from a little bit of a cough over here. So Anthony, I represent about over a million users of the VALR exchange, VALR cryptocurrency exchange. We're the largest crypto exchange in Africa. We do not serve US customers. So our audience is really people outside of the United States. We've probably got about 70 to 75% in South Africa, 25 to 30% in the rest of the world, Europe, Asia, etc. So I'm really excited to have this conversation also. And I wanted to frame that for you, which is that the audience is actually, we're all following what's going on in the US politics. We're following what's happening in crypto. And you have a very unique kind of viewpoint. So I wanted to give you that context. Anthony, some of you know him and some of you may not, but he is an investor, lawyer, author. He's the founder of SkyBridge Capital, an investment company, previously worked at Goldman Sachs, has a law degree from Harvard Law School, has a very impressive resume. And probably most commonly known for his appointment as communications director under Trump in his first term, had a very, very short tenure of 10 days. And you are one of the...
Farzam, don't chip me out of that last day, okay? Even
11, Trump, is it 11? Okay, 11 days.
Trump
so
was tweeting about
later,
me last... Trump was tweeting about me last week. He called me a major loser that lasted 11 days. Yeah, I mean, I think the president should be the official scorer of the whole thing. Right?
I stand corrected. Let's move that from 10 days to...
Don't get me out of that last day. That was a big day. I got my ass fired on that day. That was a big one.
You are the only guest that I've had that has a time period named after them. We have a week, we have a fortnight, and we have a Scaramucci of 11 days. Let's call it 11 days.
You can use it in a sentence, right? Like Liz Truss lasted 4.1 Scaramucci.
There we go. There we go.
You know, Kevin McCarthy lasted 24.5 Scaramucci's as House Speaker.
Wonderful. So really, Anthony, I want to get your thoughts on a whole bunch of things. I think just to start off with, what are you spending your time on right now?
Well, I mean, the backdrop behind me is my organization. I started it in 2005. We'll be celebrating our 25th anniversary in March of this coming year.
Congratulations.
The name of the firm is SkyBridge Capital. We have about $3 billion in assets under management. It's a diversified alternative investment manager. So we have a fund of funds, which we put money out to hedge funds. We have a cryptocurrency fund where a lot of our personal money is invested in it alongside a few of our clients. And then we have a tranche of private equity. We've been always believers in what we call late stage equity financing. So we have investments in things like SpaceX and Klarna and Chime, things that we think are imminent to go public, or there'll be some type of monetization event, or something like SpaceX may never go public, but you know it'll have $1 trillion market capitalization for our clients over the time that we own it. So for us, about right now, about 1/3 of our assets are in crypto, mostly in Bitcoin and Solana. We do own things like Avalanche and Polkadot. I do have a position in some small gaming tokens, but nothing too big outside of those.
Got it. And tell us a little bit about how you got into crypto. When did you start first investing into crypto and why?
Well, actually, it goes back to the White House, believe it or not. So I was in a meeting, and Farzam, it was on a Wednesday. You know how I know it was a Wednesday? I was only there for one Wednesday, so I know it was actually on a Wednesday.
Okay.
And I was in the Roosevelt Room, which is right outside of the Oval Office, and we were talking to some executives from the Federal Reserve. They had actually were in the process of publishing a white paper on the potentiality of digitizing the U.S. dollar. And so I remember reading that paper, and I remember thinking, wait, whoa, they're talking about the blockchain, and blockchain meaning cryptocurrency, meaning Bitcoin. And it was a combination of those things that led me at the ripe old age of 53 to say, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I got to get myself up to speed on the blockchain. And so I got fired a couple of days later. And then when I went back to New York, one of the great things about getting fired from the White House, the way I was fired, if you own your own company, you just go back and work at your own company. You know, it is what it is. No drama.
That's right.
But I came back here and I registered the URL, skybridgebitcoin.com. And I began the process of starting to first understand Bitcoin. That was the first thing. And then secondarily, start making strategic investments in Bitcoin. It spilled over into Ethereum. It spilled over eventually into Solana. But now it's mostly Solana and Bitcoin.
Got you. Have you got a bigger position in Solana or Bitcoin?
So I actually have a bigger position actually in Solana. They started roughly equally, but Solana's done way better.
It has.
You know, Solana's been on a monster run. Obviously, 8 to 240 is about as big of a run as you can get. You know, Bitcoin has obviously done incredibly well. I see them very, very differently. Obviously, you know, I would say Bitcoin is in the category of store of value for me. It's a form of digital property. If I say digital gold, Michael Saylor will watch your podcast and he'll call me and yell at me. I have to say digital property. You know, I'm about to publish a book called The Little Book of Bitcoin.
The what book of Bitcoin?
Yeah, the title of the book is called The Little Book of Bitcoin. And then the subtitle is What Wall Street Already Knows That You Need to Know. And Michael Saylor wrote the foreword. I'm sorry about you're getting live sirens here. Sirens here in New York City, so maybe you can cut that out. But I had Michael write the introduction for me, the foreword of the book, and so I'll tell you this story because I think you'll find this interesting. He called me from his yacht in the Mediterranean, and he said, "Mooch, I love the book. I learned a lot in the book. Actually, some great stories in the book, but I hate the last chapter of the book." And I said, "Michael, why do you hate the last chapter of the book?" He says, "Well, your conclusion after writing about this amazing technology and writing about the promise of Bitcoin is you're making a recommendation to the reader to put 2 to 3% of their money in Bitcoin. Well, how much of your net worth do you have in Bitcoin?" And I said, "Well, it's about 55%. And he says, "Okay, so why are you recommending 2 to 3%? Do you think Bitcoin's one of the best investment ideas that you've ever come across?" "Yes, I do." "Do you have 50 other ideas like that?" I said, "No, I don't." "Then why would you recommend a 2% allocation?" So I had to rip up the last chapter of the book, and I rewrote it. And I basically said, "Listen, I was yelled at by Michael Saylor. Here's what I own. Here's what he owns. Make your own decision. But we think this is one of the best investments out there."
Amazing. I think that's fair to say of many people in this space, that they aren't in this with 1 or 2 or 3% or even 5%, but a much bigger conviction. And so I think a lot of us do that because you want to be a little bit more conservative. It's kind of unorthodox to go and tell someone to put in 50% of their portfolio into any asset. But I think that speaks to the conviction that many of us have about where this industry and where this asset class is going. On that note, Anthony, so last couple of weeks, obviously since the election, we've seen Bitcoin prices soar. We're around the $90,000 level right now. I wanted to get your thoughts about that and also start moving a little bit into kind of the implications of Trump's presidency, his discussion about the strategic Bitcoin reserve. We've obviously just seen a presidential candidate in Poland talk about if he wins, he's going to also have a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and we expect that type of trend to continue globally. So I want to get your thoughts, just a very open question. What's going on in the markets and where are we going from here?
Okay, so I mean, these are great questions. So let me just preface it by saying that Trump was not my choice. I would have preferred Vice President Harris. I think that was very very clear. And it just has to do with the rhetoric that Trump is offering to people. When he says he's going to use the American military to go after his political adversaries, and when he's saying he's going to revoke birthright citizenship, which has been a hallmark of the welcome mat culturally of the United States for 250 years, when he says he's going to demolish institutions like the Department of Education, the Department of Justice, he's going to pull the FBI out of the Department of Justice and put it into the White House. So it's almost like effectively like a Gestapo. That sort of heated rhetoric shouldn't be coming from the mouth of the president. So there's a reason why a group of us, which includes General Milley and General Kelly, General Mattis, Rex Tillerson, there's 40 or 50 of us that said, hey, the guy's too dangerous. He's too dangerous to be president. Okay, he won. I'm an American. I wish him well. There's no such thing as being a sore loser when you're an American. God bless him. I wish him well. It's obviously been very good for my crypto portfolio. Right. Because what happened in that election, and I told the Democrats this, but nobody would listen. I said, you have no discernible or justifiable reason to be this anti-crypto. Okay, now I'll tell you why they were anti-crypto. It has to do with Elizabeth Warren's relationship with Sam Bankman-Fried's parents. And so Joe Bankman and Barbara Fried were best friends with her. They were cavorting with her before the demise of FTX. They had Sam meet with her and Gary Gensler many, many times. And they were on the cusp of giving him margin approval, which would have put FTX in the pantheon of exchanges like the CME or the New York Stock Exchange. Okay. And so they were very close to doing that. Of course, Sam lost his way, got accused of fraud, and the thing imploded. But in order to shield the two of them from the potential flack that was coming at them, they went very, very hard at the crypto industry. It cost the Democrats the House and the Senate because the crypto industry manned up, womaned up. They created hundreds of millions of dollars of PAC money. They took Sherrod Brown out. They took Bob Casey out in Pennsylvania, and there were 48 races that they participated in and gave money to. They won 48 of the 48 races. And so Elizabeth Warren couldn't even explain at a debate with John Deaton, who was running against her. Now, she has a strong constituency, so she won, but she couldn't explain why she was anti-crypto. It's sort of a funny, ironic thing. So we sit here today with the strongest Congress for crypto. And of course, President Trump has got great political instincts. If you like or dislike him, he recognized early on that being with crypto was certainly going to help him. And I'll just say this far as being against crypto, I don't think one vote was garnered. I don't think one electoral vote was garnered by the Democrats. So we have Trump now. I know his strengths and weaknesses very well. Remember, I served not only in the White House, but I worked on the campaign for 9 months.
Team as well, right?
I was one of the chairmen of the executive transition team. So I helped oversee the staffing of all those governmental agencies with particular emphasis on the Treasury. So I can tell you exactly what goes on in Trump world in terms of the way he thinks about staffing people. It's a little bit like a casting call at The Apprentice. And so I can tell you that there'll be good things that will happen and there'll be difficult things that will happen. And I hope and pray that the very good people that Trump will bring into the White House will curb some of the tendencies that he has. Because if he's going to use the American military against his political adversaries, I could tell you that would be a really bad thing for the world. It would be a really bad thing for the United States. It would also be a horrific thing for the international markets and for the cryptocurrency market. Go after your political adversaries in the U.S., and then this shining beacon that has the most liquid and deepest capital market in the world will become like every other nonsensical country. And so I hope and pray that he doesn't do that. But, listen, he won that election, and those were the promises that he made. But on crypto, I'm very close to Brian Brooks. I think you may know who he is.
Before we go to crypto, I want to ask you this on that, on Trump. What is your personal relationship like with him right now, or is it non-existent at the moment?
Well, listen, I mean, he's still tweeting about me. I mean, last week, I think he tweeted that I was a major loser. So I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, in terms of his love for me, it's probably 9.5. I mean, you don't tweet about people that you don't love.
He's thinking
Yeah.
about you,
Well,
Anthony.
of course.
Right?
It's like, the dog is hitting you with his nose and trying to get you to throw the ball. Of course he's doing that. He knows why I'm mad at him. He went after my wife. Okay. Where did you grow up, Farzam?
I grew up in Kenya in East Africa.
Oh, you grew up in East Africa. Okay. Yeah. I can't talk about Kenya. I've been there once. I've drank Tusker beer at the bar. I went to safari in Kenya.
Yep.
But I can't speak about the neighborhoods. But I grew up in an Italian neighborhood on Long Island.
Yeah.
I said one thing on the Bill Maher show that Trump didn't like. He started attacking me. Yeah. Okay, I don't know. I was supporting him 2 years after he fired me. I was giving him money, the whole thing. Yeah. He starts attacking me. I'm like, this guy's nuts. So I think I called him the fattest president since William Howard Taft because I know he hates being fat. Okay, and then he started attacking me some more. And I was like, all right, well, your fastball, you've lost your fastball. You're not really trolling me properly. And that pissed him off. And then he started attacking my wife. Who the hell does that? Okay, you can't do that.
Yeah.
I can't speak for East Kenya, but I can speak for Port Washington, Long Island, in an Italian-American neighborhood. Don't attack my wife.
Yeah. Okay,
don't pull a civilian into a fight. I'm a public figure. You want to attack me, go ahead. And then that's when the fight really starts. So he knows why we're fighting, and I know why we're fighting,
So it became very personal.
We have a personal relationship. We knew each other for 20 years.
Yeah.
Could we have a personal relationship again? Maybe. We have to see. He'd have to apologize for that, though. That's a non-starter for somebody like me.
I hear you.
But I accept that he's president. No problem. I hope he picks good people. But listen, he's prone to impetuosity and he's prone to some awkward decision making, and you got to hope that he doesn't do that.
I hear you. When you joined the podcast before we started rolling the recording button, you joked about maybe this is the last podcast you do before you're deported. So I want to hear, like, what part of you, or is there any part of you that's kind of concerned about your relationship with him, the rule of law in the country, and kind of your stance, and any threats to that, or is it a complete joke, or is there some truth to that?
I listen. What makes jokes generally funny is there's always an element of truth in a joke. Okay, so the fact that he has said things like that from the bully pulpit and then got elected, I think right there definitionally is disqualifying. Okay? In a country like this, it became rich and prosperous for a reason. The political leadership left the private sector alone. They didn't meddle in the affairs of the private sector. Here are the rules. Here are the taxes on your success. We're by and large going to leave you alone unless you break the law or hurt your fellow citizens.
Right.
But so if you had an opinion and you wanted to share your opinion, I don't think Dwight Eisenhower, Franklin Roosevelt, or Ronald Reagan were spending any time trolling private citizens who had an opinion about them, who were exercising their First Amendment rights.
Sure.
So from that point of view, I really think that stuff is disqualifying. He shouldn't be where he is. Okay. Having said that, the electorate has spoken. He won the popular vote. He won the electoral college.
Overwhelmingly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now the question is, if he's going to execute on that, it'd be a disaster for the country. But I mean, I've never lived in any fear in my life. I mean, I wouldn't be where I am today, growing up where I grew up, if I lived in fear. So
absolutely,
I sleep very comfortably at night.
Good.
But there are places in the world where you grew up, near you, where people do think like that. Yeah. And two people have a vicious sound. I mean, they use bone saws in certain parts of the world. They rip people's tongues out for their opinions. If you say something about the leadership in communist China, they could put you in a camp. They could put you in a re-education camp. So listen, that's not the United States. It shouldn't be the United States. I hope it won't be the United States. Yeah. Generally, no, I'm not worried about it, but there are people that are worried about it. There are media and political consultants that are worried about it. And, that's very bad for an economy. Trust me.
Yeah.
The minute you start getting people fearful of free speech, they also lose their creativity. Remember, one of the greatest things about freedom of speech is we teach our children. In a second grade classroom in the United States, a kid learns that he can speak freely.
Right.
He goes on to create Facebook. He goes on to create Bitcoin. He goes on to create Google. These things are a direct product of the freedom. When a country tells you that you can't speak freely, they have to steal the intellectual property from the other country because they got the kids blocked up. You see what I mean?
Yeah,
so there's all these ancillary benefits to the economy of the freedom of speech.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, last comment I'll make on that, and then I want to move into kind of going back to the crypto markets is like, I think there has been, obviously the country is tremendously divided right now. And regardless of the outcome of the election, the country is no less divided. And I think there's a particular trajectory that the United States has been on for the last couple of decades. So I studied in Berkeley in California. And I remember talking to my economics class and talking about, what are the chances that the US dollar, doesn't last? And people laughed me out of the room. They're like, what are you even talking about? And I think, a couple of decades on, people are now starting to express a little bit of concern about the US dollar's role in the global economy. We have a lot of concerns about the spiraling debt in the United States. So I think, there could be an argument to say, whether Harris or Trump won, it doesn't necessarily make a big difference in the trajectory of the country. Having said that, I want to move towards crypto because there's a lot of discussions about the Bitcoin reserve and how that could potentially extinguish the United States debt over time. And I wanted to move back to the crypto markets, and you were starting to talk about your views on the crypto markets and moving into strategic reserve of Bitcoin. So back to you on that thought process.
Let's say that we create a strategic reserve in Bitcoin pursuant to what Cynthia Loomis is putting on the table. And let's say over the course of 2 years, we buy 1 million coins. And let's say, for the sake of argument, that those coins go to, you tell me, $500,000?
What's your view? Let's talk about that right now. What's your view?
But that's only, you tell me, is that $5 trillion? I think so, right?
So I did an analysis myself, and I actually do, even though Michael Saylor may not like me, I do like the view of Bitcoin as digital gold. And when you look at digital gold, you look at the market cap of gold, you look at the market cap of Bitcoin, you are looking at a price per coin of about 899,000 US dollars just to hit market cap parity, right? But as I say, anything that's gone from analog to digital, the digital version outstrips the analog version by multiples.
Okay.
So I think
we see it very similarly. Go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
No. I'm just saying. So we see it similarly. So let's just use that math. Let's say we go to $3 million US dollars per coin. Okay. And so that would roughly be a $45 trillion market. And let's say that the United States owned 1 million of those coins. Okay. And so you tell me that's roughly half of the, it's 5% of the market, right? Do I have that right? Because 10% is.
So let's start again. So
1 million.
3 million coin goes to about 60 million, right? Just over 60 million. 60 trillion market cap, right?
Yeah.
20 million times 3 million.
Exactly. Right? So again, I'm just using the numbers that we're talking about. 5% of that is 3 trillion.
So 5% of 60 trillion is 3 trillion.
3 trillion. Okay. Yeah. So I'm just saying the United States has a $35 trillion budget deficit. So if this goes 3x gold, it's not enough to pay off the deficit. I mean, yes, could you reduce the deficit by 10%? Yes, you'll be able to do that.
Yeah.
But what will happen, unfortunately, and the reason why you're concerned about the U.S. dollar and I'm concerned about the U.S. dollar is they'll monetize the debt. When you had 8% inflation in 2022, the 8% inflation, okay, that means that 8% of the debt went away. Does everybody understand that?
Yeah,
I mean,
of course.
Just went away.
Exactly.
Okay, so also means, see, the weird thing about our personalities, if I buy a house that's worth $16,000 in 1960 and it's now on Zillow for $800,000, I feel richer, even though it's the exact same house. 100%. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
If I buy 1 ounce of gold when gold was $35 an ounce in 1971, before they took it off the gold standard, it's now $3,000 an ounce. I feel richer, but it's still 1 ounce of gold. So the irony of what happens with inflation, the numbers make people feel richer when they're actually getting poorer, which is why it's psychologically tolerated by the population.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Let me share.
So what happens is, though, the poor and the middle class get screwed because
Correct.
it eats into their disposable income. That's why we have such populism.
So I want to share just one story on that. So obviously in Zimbabwe in the 2000s had hyperinflation, right? And there was a one point when you look at your home, if you were in Zimbabwean, and you looked at it, the price going higher and higher and higher and feeling good about it yourself. But then there came a point where you realized that the measuring stick that you were using to measure your wealth was actually completely flawed and actually started going, the price of your house went up so high that you couldn't believe it anymore because it was in the trillions of Zimbabwean dollars. So at some point, that psychological kind of feeling of that you're doing well disappears altogether because you realize you're actually measuring it with the wrong
then
yardstick.
You lose faith and confidence and everything.
Right.
Yes.
So obviously we're nowhere close to that in the United States. But I think one of the things I think we have a little bit too much arrogance oftentimes in the United States is that we think that will never happen to us. If you talk to the populace, and that's just disproven by history, right? The incumbents of the monetary systems of the world have seen that happen to themselves, whether it's, we saw it in Weimar Republic and other places as well, right? So going back to you, so inflation is a big problem. You said it's not going to wipe out the debt, even if we have, as you said, right now, what is the debt sitting at? We are at $35 trillion.
Yeah, 35, yeah.
The $35 trillion, as you said, 10% of that debt, even if we go to 3 million a coin, and we've bought 1 million coins. I believe right now the United States is sitting on about 220,000 coins, right? Come from the confiscations.
Yeah, that's correct.
So that's a nice context. This is not going to be, even if we start producing or having that Bitcoin reserve, we're not going to solve our debt problems.
Okay, but now let's channel Michael Saylor.
All right.
Okay, because Michael Saylor believes that Bitcoin will be 7% of the world's market capitalization, and it's going to go to $13 million a coin. Okay, and so to put that in perspective, that's 6 times what you and I are talking about.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, that 3 trillion goes to 18 trillion.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden it becomes more manageable, right, from a balance sheet perspective. And so I think it would be important for the United States to consider doing it. And I think it would be important for the United States to figure out a way to do 2 things. One, to continue to grow its economy in real terms, not just nominally, but to put some spending curbs in place to effectuate change. So I'm not on the Doge committee, but if I was on the Doge committee, I would ask Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to look at the pay-as-you-go legislation that was put in place in the 1990 period of time by the George Herbert Walker Bush administration. And so just quickly, what were they?
What is that?
You could Google it. It's called pay-as-you-go. And what it was you had guardrails in place. And what were the guardrails? The guardrails were such that if you had a tax cut, no problem. You had to find something in the budget to cut. If you were going to increase social services, no problem. But then you had to commensurately raise taxes. And so these were guardrails that were put in by George Herbert Walker Bush. They were adhered to by Bill Clinton. And a result of which, very, very successfully, I might add, very successfully, we ran a budget surplus in the year 2000. We had a $240 billion budget surplus. If you ask Bill Clinton today, sir, what attributed to the budget surplus, I adhere to the pay-as-you-go legislation. When the attack happened on September the 11th, we took ourselves off pay-as-you-go. And you can stop the line and you could see where the deficit spending went exponential.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you return to that, it would take about 15 years but you could get the debt to GDP ratios back into something that's very comfortable. And if you own 1 million Bitcoins on top of that, country's in a very, very good shape financially.
That's
So
fascinating.
it's doable.
Yeah.
But Alan Greenspan in his book, The Age of Turbulence, references this pay-as-you-go legislation. And anyway, it's something
awesome.
I think people should think about.
Awesome. And so for the benefit of our listeners, right now, I think we're about 125% debt to GDP in the United States at the moment. That figure has obviously been rising quite significantly over time. I wasn't actually aware that the inflection point was 2001 after September 11th. That's very interesting. I'll have to take a look at that.
And again, we cut taxes in March, and he was beginning the process of cutting spending to adhere to pay as you go. But we went to war because of 9/11, and it was the first time in the history of the United States that we went to war without a tax increase. Every time we've gone to war, we've raised taxes. Bush and Cheney made the decision not to raise taxes.
Got you. So we had this huge spending spree, but without the concomitant increase in revenue, tax revenue. So hence we're seeing the debt rise. So let's talk a little bit more about whether this strategic Bitcoin reserve is actually going to happen. Obviously, during your time of knowing Trump in his first administration, he was anti-crypto. He had some tweets about, just a whole bunch of negative stuff about Bitcoin. What has led to that change in his thinking? And then what has led to his change? Is it something that he's going to carry out, do you think, or is it more just a campaign promise that may not materialize?
Okay, I mean, this is an amazing question because I'm only going to guess at this now, right? Because I haven't had personal contact with Trump, but I do know Vivek, and I do know players around Trump that have pushed the crypto narrative, Omid Malik, et cetera.
Yeah.
And I think it's a combination of things. I think, number one, his son, who's about 18 or 19 years old, Barron Trump, is a crypto enthusiast.
Gotcha.
And I think he got his father up to speed. And then number two, Trump has phenomenal political instincts. And I think in his observation of what was going on, he was like, wait a minute. This doesn't hurt anybody if I'm positive on crypto. It doesn't hurt the US dollar. I was negative on crypto because that was the public statements from the Treasury, and that was the public statements from the Federal Reserve at that time. It wasn't really my inherent belief one way or another. I was told by my staff to push out negative crypto tweets, if you will. And so I think what he did was he looked around and said, well, I'm going to raise money from this. This is going to be good for my party. And I'm going to go speak at the cryptocurrency. The Bitcoin conference was one of the largest cryptocurrency events in the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was huge. It was huge. And he made a very big statement there. But again, I think politicians say a lot, right, before the elections. So it sounds like you think that this is actually based on his conviction. His sons talk to him. He's got players around him. Actually, JD Vance obviously has a position in Bitcoin that he's disclosed. So it sounds like you think this is actually going to be a reality.
I do. I do. If I had to make a guess here, because there's two things that are going on. You've got the Senate Banking Committee is going to be chaired by Tim Scott. Tim Scott came to my blockchain event in Wyoming last summer. And so at the end of the summer, coincident to the central banking event in Wyoming, I did a decentral banking event. I called it the Wyoming Blockchain Symposium. And I had Senator Loomis there, and I had Senator Scott there, as well as the governor and a few other people. And I think those people are intent upon getting that done. And I think Trump likes the idea. And remember, if you believe that this is digital gold, to what you just said, okay, and you're using your fiat currency that you're literally making out of thin air to buy something that is a potential globally sourced store of value, and your competitors are buying lots of gold, which gold is at an all-time high. Lots of central banks have been buying gold. This would be something that would be inside the wheelhouse of what something that Donald Trump would do. So I do think this will happen.
I know you mentioned that a lot of central banks are buying gold. Are you able to share your views on that or your knowledge on that? I'm not so sure that many that we know are public about that. But is any inside information you have on that or any views?
I'd have to get my head of research is the one that's been telling me that. I'd have to look it up exactly. If you're cool with it after the show, I'll send you a link. Maybe you can add it.
Yeah, we'll put that on
to the link. Okay.
I'm aware like Bhutan and places like that obviously have a lot of Bitcoin on their balance sheets. Obviously El Salvador and I actually read somewhere recently that there are about 5 nation states that have crypto.
What's your cell phone?
I'll send you a message after the show.
Okay.
I'll send it to you right now. I've got your.
Send me a message, and I'll send you this article that I was sent to me by my team. It's actually from the World Banking. Okay, so that's an article from the World Gold Council talking about central banks buying lots of gold this year to shore up their capital account. So again, the reserve currency, fiat reserve currency is U.S. dollar, but there are lots of central banks buying gold in the year 2024. And then the question is, will banks be buying Bitcoin? And as you pointed out earlier, if the United States is buying it, the Polish presidential candidate is saying he's up for and willing to buy it. There you go.
Absolutely. I think right. I think there's going to be a lot of movement, and that also brings me to there are certain institutional players, Anthony, like Vanguard, who said it was irresponsible to allow their users to access crypto, and this is like more than 100% ago, right? It rises. So, given your vantage point from SkyBridge Capital and your discussions with large institutions, is that just a matter of time that places like Vanguard are going to say, "Listen, sorry, we got that call wrong," and like any information about when things like that will be changing?
Yeah, good question. So, I think one of the toughest human emotions in business is pride.
Yes,
and so when you get something wrong, to be able to drop your pride and reverse course is a very tough thing for people.
Yeah.
But I think that it's hard to know, right? Like Charlie Munger, may his soul rest in peace. He said that Bitcoin was rat poison or was financial destruction. Buffett says it's rat poison squared.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, they, meaning that group, may never admit that they got it wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. And I accept that. And that's part of human pride. But I think the broader discussion about whether or not that this is an asset class, I think has been resolved. And so what you're going to need to open the floodgate is stablecoin and cryptocurrency legislation in this congressional term. So if you tell me it's the end of 2025 and we have stablecoin legislation and we know that Solana and Ripple and Ethereum are in fact not securities, but are actually commodity-like tokens, then you'll see, and it's right there in the law, okay, then you'll see every investment bank and you'll see every asset manager say, okay, we've got to do this. This is something that we need to give our clients. And so I would submit back to you, think like a good asset management company. I don't want to be short one weapon in my arsenal. I don't want to go to the wealthy individual or the large institution and say, yeah, I have no capability of managing a digital portfolio for you. Yeah. So I think that is coming.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yes.
And I think you're right. I think there's a big place for kind of regulation. And one of the things that I think is a boon for the Trump administration right now is the fact that there was such a big red wave. And I think there's a possibility of doing quite a lot of good from the perspective of having some clear regulations, which we haven't had, obviously, over the last few years in the current administration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Views on the Treasury Secretary. and how that may influence the crypto markets.
Well, so I don't know when this is going to be published, but the decision is going to be made no later than Wednesday. That's from Donald Trump himself. There's been reports that Howard Lutnick has upset the president with sort of being a little bit more forceful verbally. I think that, I still maintain it'll either be Lutnick or Scott Bessent.
Yeah.
Not sure which one it'll be. But I don't think he's going to go outside the box to a Mark Rowan or Larry Fink or a Kevin Warsh. I don't see that because, those are people that Trump just doesn't know as well.
Yeah.
But listen, anything can happen in Trump world. I mean,
anything
can happen in Trump world. But I would tell these candidates, if they were here with you and me in this podcast with microphones, I would say to Howard, relax. Okay, your mouth is, you're a brilliant guy. You're a great CEO. You understand the markets as well as anybody. You'd be a phenomenal Treasury Secretary, but don't out-Trump Trump. Relax, that would be my message to him.
Absolutely. And I would imagine Howard, though, would be better for the crypto markets than Bessent. Just given his, I think, just also for the context.
I think they would both be good. So,
okay.
I would say I'll make a prediction here. I feel like Brian Brooks could be in charge of the SEC. And I think Brian was formerly the comptroller of the Treasury. And I know Brian super well. And if Brian Brooks is the SEC chair, I think the crypto markets will be incredibly happy with that, like a quantum happy, because he understands these markets and he wants the U.S. to maintain its mantle of financial services leadership, and he would more or less be the inverse Gary Gensler. And
he also spent some time, I think, as CEO of Binance US as well, right? He obviously left. Yeah. We don't know exactly the reasons of his departure, but that wasn't too long-lived.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Getting towards some of the closing comments and questions for the podcast, I am a very big optimist for humanity, Anthony.
Okay.
I think we have a lot of issues, a lot of problems, but I think the technology that we've seen that has just emerged over the past few decades, we're living in a completely different world. So I'm 43 years old right now. In high school, we didn't have cell phones. I wasn't using cell phones, but we're living in a completely different world right now. We are living, it's very, very tightly knit, obviously, right? We know what's going on at all times with communications, and now with crypto and Bitcoin, the transfer of value is changing. So I think it's like we're going through some huge growth spurts as a teenager, and there's a lot of discomfort. I think we will land at a good place, but without a lot of discomfort along the way, or with a lot of discomfort along the way. So I want to kind of get your parting views of how do you make sense of kind of the world paradigm right now? Is there a framework that you look at and you kind of interpret our political situation globally, our economic situation? Just like, how do you step back and look at the world, make sense of it, and then kind of position yourself for that from an economic, political, or any other perspective?
So, it's a great, listen, I appreciate and I share your optimism. Okay. I guess I would say it a little differently than you. Okay. I guess I would ask you to think about it in the following way, is if we don't blow ourselves up.
Yeah.
Okay. And we don't kill ourselves, right? Like, do you know what Dunbar's number is?
Well, 150.
Yeah. Okay. So Dunbar's number is that you and I can develop about 150 relationships. And that's it. After that, it becomes very hard for our brains to process. And so the evolution that got you to where you are is small collectives, small villages, small towns, people feeding each other, helping each other. Someone's studying medicine and helps the other people, and they barter, and eventually they create a currency where they can use it with each other. But we don't have a magnitude for billions. So if I take this plastic bottle, I throw it on the ground outside in New York City, right. I'm like, well, what's the big deal? It's just one bottle, right? But I'm not thinking about the other billions of people, or if I'm
Right.
toking up the environment with my private jet or my used yacht, well, what's the big deal, right? But we're not able to think in this massive way, okay? And so, what is the irony about human evolution? What got us to where we are right now? The question then is, do we need another level of transformative thinking to get us to this optimistic place at the end of the rainbow that you're talking about?
Right.
Or can we do it without that? Can we do it inside the confines of Dunbar's number? And so I'd like to believe we can do it, but I do think it's going to require a different form of leadership politically. And so you're 43, I'm 60. I'm going to leave it up to your generation to figure that out. But ultimately, it's going to require a group of people, and it's certainly some of the people that will eventually lead the United States, to understand what you and I are talking about,
Right.
and to say, okay, I can't just think in the interests of my people, but I got to just think in the interest of everybody. And there was a great speech in June of 1963 by Jack Kennedy at American University. He gave probably his best speech. You can get the transcript of what John Kennedy said, President Kennedy said in that speech, is that, listen, we're all drinking the same water. We're all breathing the same air.
Right.
That's why I laugh at the hard left in this country. Stop drilling. Okay, you're going to stop drilling here in North America, but then you're going to the Saudis asking them for more oil.
Yeah.
Okay, they're drilling. I mean, it's the same air, guys.
We're
I'm
one
just letting
world.
you know.
Yeah.
It's one world. So we got to get people to think like that. But like you, I am an optimist. Like you, I think that our world, we've been gifted with this amazingly abundant world.
Really do.
And we've been gifted with processes now that we've developed in this world that will allow us to be very prosperous and deepen the prosperity, where lower and middle class people and impoverished people around the world can have rising living standards due to the technology, due to the automation, due to the improvements in science and biotech. Yeah. So I don't know if it's the exact answer you're looking for, but that's the way I think about that big meta question.
I like that. I will share. I had a conversation with my co-founder recently, and he was saying that he feels like our governance systems globally are starting to fail humanity. Mm-hmm. And when you look at, historically speaking, you look at, there was a time where the clergy were, the leaders of our civilization, of our societies, right? And there were some wrong turns that the clergy took. And really right now, the clergy is not really involved in governance of society. It's a spiritual thing. There's been by the way, I'm a very spiritual person. I'm a Baha'i, but there has been some wrong turns that we took that led to kind of the political vanguard, if you want to say, to take root as far as the governance of the world. I think we're at a stage right now where, the discussion is which political party is going to win. And I think we're now moving to a stage where we're saying, is our governance structure serving us, period? Is it a political party at all? Is our electoral system working at all? And the reason I say that is if you look at kind of all of the people on ballots across the world, we are incentivizing megalomaniacs to come up and say, I am the best. I am here to serve you. And those are the people that get themselves on the ballot. So I think we're going to have, there's a lot of soul searching as humanity is to say, what are the alternate forms of governance that we have and that we need to take us into that world? And one of the biggest things for me is, regardless of where you are in political parties right now, I think we can all agree that there is way too much evasion of truth coming from the lips of politicians. And I think so long as we have a system where we have lies left, right, and center, it's very difficult for the world to actually function. So I think that's why I think it's going to get much worse when there's so much disinformation, so much misinformation that it's going to be very difficult to tell right from wrong or reality from falsehood. Mm-hmm. But we're going to have to really, I think that's the kind of the doldrums that I'm talking about that we're going to have to hit and get ourselves out of. But through that, I have a lot of optimism for humanity, but it's going to be a tough road to get there.
Well, this is where, believe it or not, the blockchain could actually come into play. There are news aggregators and there are people that are really trying to get you to the truth. As we both know, there's tons of disinformation,
Absolutely.
hard left information that's false, hard right information that's false. And so you could create a decentralized tokenized structure where it's effectively like community notes on something like X, where people are, verified accurate facts, or this is unverified BS, that can happen over time, and that will help that process for sure.
I think it's going to be a tool for sure. My last question to you, Anthony, is there a question that I haven't asked you or that you should have been asked on a podcast? And what is your response?
I guess, I guess the question that I never get asked that I always think about is, again, this is a little self-serving though, but it's like, how do you get through things? Okay. I got fired from investment banking at Goldman. I failed the bar twice. I got fired from the White House. I invested money and lost money, ups and downs over the course of my career. I allowed Sam Bankman-Fried, who's now serving 25 years in jail, to buy a piece of my company. And yet, I've had, I think, a pretty spectacular, knock on wood, career. But yet, because of my profile, there's 5 or 6 major mistakes that I've made that have hurt me. And I guess the question that people don't ask me, which I would be happy to ask, is how the hell do you get through stuff like that? And I think that the number one reason, and this goes back to Stoicism, is to recognize that there's just so much that you can control. But with good habits, the number one thing you can control is your happiness, is your mood, is your expression in human life, your joy. And so you said something 5 minutes ago, which I obviously agree with. I'm optimistic for human beings and I'm optimistic for the world. But I think, we have to be optimistic for ourselves. I think if you're that way, you can handle a lot of things. Now, of course, health things, someone tells me, that's it. I know with 100% certainty, God bats 1,000. And I know with 100% certainty, I'll eventually be going. I don't know where I'm going, but I'll eventually be going. I can't control that either. And I think it's very important. If you get that into your mindset early in your life, you can live a much happier, more relaxed life.
Beautiful. Anthony, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, brother. It's a real pleasure to be on with you. Let's stay connected, please. We have each other's number now.
Definitely will. Have a good day.
God bless.
Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.